Welcome, my growth seekers. Today we're taking a deep dive into generational growth. I'm your host, Dr. Frank Gilliam. And we're not just going to talk about the differences between boomers, Gen X, millennials, and Gen Z. We're going to explore how those differences fuel personal development, which I find to be incredibly interesting, right? Yeah, so imagine sitting at a table with people from each of these generations. What could you learn from their journeys and how they view growth? In this episode, that's what we're here to uncover. Isn't that exciting? What I find fascinating about our approach is that we see these generational divides not as obstacles, but as opportunities. We know that by understanding how each generation grows and learns, we can amplify our personal development. So it's not about us versus them. It's about finding the hidden connections that spark growth, even in the most unexpected places. So let's get into the breakdown of each generation, because it's more than just giving you a textbook definition. We go deep into how those generational experiences translate into specific approaches to growth. So let's start with the boomers, born between 1946 and 1964. Okay? They're often characterized by their dedication to innovation and strong work ethic, that classic pursuit of the American dream. But let me point out that for boomers, growth isn't about climbing the corporate ladder anymore. It's about embracing new forms of well-being and staying adaptable. In a world that's changing faster than ever, it's less about clinging to the old ways and more about finding new avenues for growth, even in retirement. One example that stuck with me was a retired boomer learning to navigate social media just to stay connected with their grandkids. But then they ended up joining an online book club and discovering this whole new community and way to learn. It's that great. So she took that initial step toward connection and turned it into a whole new avenue for personal growth, which I believe is a great example of how even small acts of adaptation can lead to something bigger. Now, what about Gen X, the latchkey generation? They're sandwiched between the boomers and the millennials, and they've often been described as resourceful and resilient. Gen X, born between 1965 and 1980, has this incredible knack for balancing multiple priorities, careers, family, and all the curveballs life throws their way. For them, growth is less about radical change and more about leveraging their experience to navigate the complexities of modern life. They're masters at finding practical solutions within existing systems. So instead of trying to reinvent the wheel, they're finding ways to make it roll smoother. Here's an example of a Gen X professional who's juggling a demanding job and caring for aging parents. Instead of letting the stress overwhelm them, they created a caregiver support group at work, which I think was a brilliant idea, turning a personal challenge into a resource for their colleagues. It's that classic Gen X practicality in action, finding solutions that benefit both themselves and their community. Now when we get to millennials, born between 1981 and 1996, the conversation about growth seems to shift quite a bit because they're known for being purpose-driven and challenging the status quo. The millennials are the generation that's actively redefining success. For them, it's not just about climbing on the traditional ladder. It's about aligning their work and life with their values and making a tangible impact on the world. So it's more holistic, and they're not afraid to question traditional systems and push for something better. I hope you can begin to see how these different generations approach growth. It's not about saying one is better than the other, but rather recognizing the strengths each generation brings to the table. Which brings me to this point. I'm not advocating for one generation over another. No, not at all. I'm highlighting how these seemingly different approaches to growth can work together to create a more well-rounded and dynamic society. So here's how Gen Z, born between 1997 and 2012, fit into all of this. They've grown up in a completely different world than the previous generations, with technology and social media as constant companions. We must acknowledge that Gen Z faces unique challenges when it comes to growth because they're constantly bombarded with information and social pressures, which can make it difficult to find their voice and sense of self. But their digital fluency and social awareness are also a powerful asset. For Gen Z, growth is about finding a balance between connectivity and self-awareness, harnessing technology for good while prioritizing their mental and emotional well-being. This is a really important point because each generation has its own unique set of strengths and challenges when it comes to growth. But where it gets interesting is how we could use those differences to connect the generations. I don't see this as a divide. I see this as an opportunity to build bridges across them. And that's what makes this work so compelling. I see these generational differences not as barriers, but as opportunities for collaboration and learning. This is some exciting stuff. Do you want to hear more about these strategies for bridging the generational divide? All right, here we go. Okay, so we've been talking about how each generation approaches personal growth differently, and here are some of my suggestions for how to bridge those gaps. It's one thing to recognize differences, but it's another to find ways to connect. One of the most powerful strategies we emphasize is intergenerational mentorship. Yeah, mentorship. And we've flipped the script on the traditional model. It's not just about older generations imparting wisdom to younger ones. We believe it's a two-way street, so instead of just thinking about a senior executive mentoring a junior employee, we're talking about a Gen Z social media expert mentoring a boomer who's trying to navigate the digital world. I believe that everyone has something valuable to offer regardless of age or experience. That makes sense, right? You know, boomers can share their life lessons and historical perspectives, while Gen Z can guide them through the ever-evolving landscape of technology and social media. It's a beautiful exchange of knowledge and skills that benefits everyone involved. Let me give you this great example of a boomer grandparent learning the ins and outs of social media from their Gen Z grandchild. Not only do the grandparents get to connect with their family and friends online, but they also gain a whole new understanding of how the younger generation communicates and sees the world. And it challenges the outdated notion that mentorship only flows from older to younger. This mentorship can accelerate growth for everyone. So mentorship is one key to bridge the divide. We're also a huge advocate of collaborative learning. Here is an example of what collaborative learning would look like. Think about a skills swap event where each generation teaches and learns from the others. That way you could have a boomer leading a workshop on financial planning while a millennial teaches a course on digital marketing. A Gen Zer shares their expertise in video editing. It's about tapping into the collective intelligence of each generation and recognizing that everyone has something unique to contribute. It's not just about bridging the generational divide. It's about blurring those lines all together and creating a space where everyone is both a teacher and a student. We see shared experiences as a powerful way to connect across generations. I suggest we find opportunities to work together towards a common goal, regardless of age. I see something like a community cleanup project where you have boomers with their organizational skills, right? Gen Xers with their problem-solving abilities, millennials with their tech savvy, and Gen Zers with their social media reach, all working side by side. It's not just about getting the job done, it's about fostering a sense of community and understanding. When people from different generations work together towards a common goal, they naturally break down stereotypes and build relationships based on mutual respect and shared purpose. We emphasize the practical applications of these ideas. It's not just about understanding generational differences in the abstract. It's about finding ways to apply that knowledge to our lives and creating meaningful connections. And let me take it a step further. By connecting these generational dynamics to the larger societal shifts that are shaping the world around us. So we're not just talking about generational differences in isolation. No, we're talking about how those differences are interacting with broader trends like the rise of technology, the growing awareness of mental health, and the increasing emphasis on social justice and inclusivity. So there's a lot to unpack here. So we've been deep diving into the Synchronized Soul's approach to generational growth, understanding the unique strength of each generation and exploring ways to bridge those divides is fascinating stuff. But now let me take it a step even further. By connecting these generational dynamics, to larger societal trends. It is crucial because you can't separate generational growth from the context of the world we're living in. These broader societal shifts are shaping how each generation approaches personal development, whether we're conscious of it or not. It feels like there's so much happening around us constantly. Technology, social change, the way work is evolving. And one of the biggest shifts is the growing awareness of mental health and well-being. And mental health is something that's impacting every generation, but it's playing out differently for each of us. It seems like we're finally getting past that old stigma around mental health. It's not something to be ashamed of or hidden away anymore. This significant shift has created new avenues for growth. We're seeing a greater emphasis on self-care mindfulness and seeking support when needed. So it's become a core part of personal development, not an afterthought. Do you see how this plays out differently across generations? You have boomers who may be discovering meditation and mindfulness practices for the first time, right? While millennials are pushing for better mental health resources in the workplace. And then there's Gen Z who are using platforms like TikTok to destigmatize mental health conversations altogether. It's fascinating to see how each generation is contributing to this shift in their own way. And it's not just about individual growth, no. It's about creating a culture where mental well-being is valued and supported. We can't talk about societal shifts without acknowledging the elephant in the room. Technology is changing everything about how we live, learn, and connect, and it's happening at an unprecedented pace. I've dedicated a significant portion of my work to exploring the impact of technology on generational growth. It's both a powerful tool and a potential distraction. It's a double-edged sword, and each generation is grappling with that duality in their own way. It's like boomers are figuring out how to leverage social media to stay connected, while millennials are navigating the gig economy and remote work, and Gen Z is practically fluent in digital communication from birth. It is amazing to see how differently each generation is interacting with technology. My point is that instead of letting technology divide us further, we need to find ways to use it as a bridge for connection and understanding. Think about all those articles you see about digital natives versus digital immigrants. It creates this sense of separation. It's like we're speaking different languages. But our approach is about finding the common ground, so instead of focusing on the divides, I encourage all of you to see technology not as a dividing line, but as a shared learning experience. Imagine a boomer teaching a Gen Zer about the history of the internet, while the Gen Zer shows the boomer how to use a new app. It's about recognizing that each generation has something to offer in this digital age. Beyond technology and mental health, we must talk about the impact of social movements on generational growth. It feels like we're living in a time when people are more vocal than ever about the changes they want to see in the world. I call this the rise of conscious activism. Yes, conscious activism, it is a powerful force for personal and collective growth. It's not just about marching in the streets. It's about challenging our assumptions, engaging in difficult conversations, and holding ourselves accountable for creating a more just and equitable world. We see this playing out across generations as well. You have Gen Z leading the charge on climate activism, millennials advocating for social justice in the workplace, and boomers drawing on their experience with past social movements to support and guide younger generations. It's this idea of a shared responsibility, recognizing that we're all interconnected and that our actions have ripple effects. It's about breaking down silos and working together towards a common goal. Take a minute and think about this whole conversation. Does it have you thinking about your interactions with people from different generations? We've all made assumptions based on those generational labels. It's easy to do. But I challenge you to go beyond those stereotypes and see the individual. I think that's so important. I want us to see these generational differences not as obstacles, but as opportunities for learning and growth by connecting with people from different generations. We can expand our worldview, challenge our assumptions, and become more well-rounded individuals. It's about embracing the richness that comes from our diversity. It's like putting together a multi-generational puzzle where each piece with its unique shape and color contributes to a more vibrant whole. As I wrap up this deep dive, here are some key takeaways. Remember that growth is a collaborative process. We can learn so much from the generations that came before us and the generations that will come after us. It's not a one-way street. It's about finding those points of connection, embracing our differences, and working together to create a future that benefits everyone. If today's episode sparked something in you, don't keep it to yourself. Hit that subscribe button, like, and drop a comment, then share this with friends or family from a different generation. Let's ignite a conversation that bridges the gaps, sparks new perspectives, and synchronizes our souls. Your action today could start a chain reaction of growth. Remember, we're all in this together. Let's embrace the richness that comes from our generational diversity and use it to create a more vibrant and fulfilling world for all of us. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive. Visit our website, syncsouls.kajabi.com. We'll see you next time.